Yes! Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Welcome back. I hope your week is unfolding beautifully. We have a tremendous live stream planned ahead. Several different updates to unpack today. Quick preview, then we'll zoom in for further detail. But Judicial Watch has now come out swinging. We love our friends over there, including Tom Fitton himself. And now they're going after the DOJ and the FBI, as you can see here. They want to get their hands on that burn bag that Kash Patel was talking about over with Catherine Herridge yesterday. And apparently there's gobs of evidence inside. And so we'll go through this clip from Catherine Herridge. She sat down with Cashy Poo. And we're going to see what he said about this evidence, because apparently they know who transferred the burn bag evidence into the burn bag and then stuffed it in the closet back next to the January 6th new subcommittee that's also out there. So we'll get into that. We'll see what Catherine Herridge had to say and then go through some new emails that dropped that, you know, may have come from a burn bag somewhere, now being leaked over to Chuck Grassley, the Judiciary Committee. Another email from the people who started to work with Jack Smith. Names that you'll remember here, like this one, MGG, standing for Molly Gaston. We remember her from a lot of the Trump prosecutions, and so we'll come back to that. Burn bag lawsuit update coming soon. Then we've got some Epstein news. Apparently cops are swarming the vault. There were a bunch of files that were moved over to some location. Somebody on the interweb started talking about this location, and then they said that they were just going to go kick the door in. And that would be, we're just confirming that we're live here, kick the door in and then go get those records and release them to all of America for all of us to see. So they stormed, or actually swarmed, the facility to make sure that doesn't happen. And then lastly, we'll talk about Judge Dugan, the backdoor judge. Remember, this judge tried to scoot an illegal alien out her back door in her courtroom. We remember covering this one. Well, now she submitted a motion and she has lost most of the big issues there. We'll unpack it. She's got trial coming up December 15th. And so we have what's called a motion in limine to dictate how the trial will unfold, whether certain evidence can be admitted, certain questions can be proposed, so on and so forth. And she lost a big one. So we've got 3 great segments to get to today, and we cannot start without celebrating the turkey pardon. Gobble, gobble. The president was out today, and you can see this big, delicious bird that you'd love to just sink your teeth into after a nice roast. Got pardoned today. Here's what it sounded like with the president and the first lady.
Are you ready?
We're ready, sir.
I just want to tell you this very important. You are hereby unconditionally pardoned. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
That bird was talking garbage. You heard it right here. Here you go. Look at it. Or maybe it was saying, "Thank you, Mr. President." Oh, that's so nice. Thank you, sir. It just couldn't wait.
Unconditionally pardoned.
That's great. All right, so here is the rest of it.
That's good. Beautiful. That's nice. Who would want to harm this beautiful bird? That's good. That's good. Thank you very much. Fantastic job. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, so that turkey was very happy that he got pardoned today. The president and the first lady making their way down to Mar-a-Lago today. This was their final bid. Bon voyage. And there's more. Apparently, they've also done an assessment of last year's turkey pardon from Dementia Joe. And they found out, guess what? You're not going to believe it. Joe used the Autopen. So last year's turkeys, their pardons are invalid, which means straight to the butcher. Let's enjoy.
Before going any further, I want to make an important announcement, because you remember last year, after a thorough and very rigorous investigation by Pam Bondi and all of the people at Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the White House Counsel's Office, and the Department of Everything. We have a Department of Everything. You know what that is? I think that's called the White House. Into a terrible situation caused by a man named Sleepy Joe Biden. He used an Autopen last year for the turkey's pardon. So I have the official duty to determine, and I have determined that last year's turkey pardons are totally invalid.
Eat them. Go find them.
As are the pardons of about every other person that was pardoned other than, where's Hunter? No, Hunter's was good. That was the one pardon, Pam, that was good, right? The rest of them are all invalid. I don't know what the hell you're going to do about that, but now we're going to take a little of the joking. That is a mess. But they're hereby null and void. The turkeys known as Peach and Blossom last year have been located, and they were on their way to be processed. In other words, to be killed. But I have stopped that journey, and I am officially pardoning them. And they will not be served for Thanksgiving dinner. We saved them in the nick of time. This one has plenty of time, but they were saved in the nick of time.
All right, so Mr. President is saving some turkeys out there. But let's not get it twisted. Their pardons were invalid. Any of these turkeys who had Autopen pardons, they don't count. So those two turkeys from Joe Biden, they had the great compassion and mercy delivered upon them, courtesy of this president. But there are a bunch of other turkeys out there that did not have that grace handed to them. And if they had an Autopen pardon from Biden, like, for example, the January 6th Select Committee turkeys, the Anthony Fauci turkey, the rest of the Biden family turkeys, Liz Cheney, Benny Thompson, Adam Schiff, all of those turkeys and their Autopen pardons, invalid. And they have not been handed a new pardon courtesy of the president. So hopefully they will still be served up on the table of justice. So nice statements today from the president. Shout out to those turkeys. And there was another fun clip here before we move on from the president on this topic. And let's see if I can grab it real quick. I just saw it as I was sitting down and then I didn't open it up. But Rapid Response is dropping a lot of statements out here. And there was also this one, which was hysterical, from the president talking about the actual names of the turkeys.
The turkeys being pardoned today go by the names of Gobble and Waddle. When I first saw their pictures, I thought we should send them, I shouldn't say this. I was going to call them Chuck and Nancy.
Oh!
But then I realized I wouldn't be pardoning them. I would never pardon those two people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pardon them. I wouldn't care what Melania told me. Darling, I think it would be a nice thing to do. I won't do it, darling. The turkey's
Sorry,
being
Melania, we love you. We love you. But some things we just have to veto. And, of course, he's the president, so he can do that. So Chuck and Nancy, this morning on the member stream, we were talking about this. We were trying to figure out what they actually were because they were Waddle and Gobble. And we thought Waddle was short for Jerry Nadler, who did the doo-doo shuffle as he's walking down the decline off the stage. But apparently he's not running for Congress again, so he can change his diaper. But that's what's happening today at the White House, and the first family now picking up and heading on down to Florida. So good developments there. But we got some other news to attend to today, and so let's get right to it. FBI now being sued by Judicial Watch. We have been following this issue for a long time. It's the burn bag matter. How did evidence end up in burn bags, shoved in closets somewhere, such that nobody at the FBI could find it, and allow certain things like the statute of limitations on any prospective crimes to expire? And then you go in and you find the evidence, and it's years later. There's nothing you can do about it. How very convenient. So we want to know what was in those burn bags. More importantly, who put them in the burn bags, who moved them into the closet, and then a follow-up question. Are those people still at the FBI? Do they still work there? Judicial Watch now wants to dig into it. They filed a lawsuit on this, and Kash Patel was communicating about this with Catherine Herridge over on her new show, which is called Straight to the Point with Catherine Herridge. And so we're going to get into it and see exactly what Kash was responding to here to this question and how he answered it, because apparently he knows the answers to those questions. And we'll see if he tells us. But we also had more emails come out from the Judiciary Committees, both on the House and the Senate side. Emails dropped from Chuck Grassley showing Jack Smith and the DOJ and these FBI goons all colluding to attack oppositional congresspeople. So all those emails and more reaction coming up. But the lawsuit announced by Judicial Watch, they said, hey, guess what, everybody? We are now suing the Justice Department, FBI is under them, for FBI records that were found in the secret room that nobody wants to talk about. Judicial Watch filed a FOIA request against the DOJ for these hidden records because apparently they came from the James Comey era. And they were just days away from escaping prosecution because of the statute of limitations. So James Comey, of course, we also saw that there was an interview with Deputy Director Dan Bongino. We know Comey was spying on Trump. He was the Obama administration's go-to guy, trying to set Trump up to be toppled from the campaign and then from office. These hidden room documents, writes Judicial Watch, may contain additional smoking guns. And so now we're suing. And we're suing in D.C. Why? Because the FBI in June of this year failed to respond to a FOIA request. And there's reporting today that Kash Patel's in trouble over there, although the White House is refuting that. We have that coming up as well. A new story from MS Now, which is their new name, saying Kash might be out soon. White House responding to that, saying no. But you know how these things go. They leak it, they gauge public opinion, and then no, we love our team. Anyways, we'll see. Anyway, so here they say, all documents referenced by Dan Bongino, they said that they discovered in a room that was hidden from us and not mentioned to us. Feels like that might be in violation of record retention requirements that are necessary under federal law. Maybe there are crimes that have been committed there. Are we going to get a criminal referral from the FBI to the DOJ for people in the FBI? They also want all internal FBI communications among officials in the offices of FBI Director Kash Patel and Bongino related to the discovery of these documents. And we also want all directives that were sent to officials about the handling and the disposition of these documents. So who went in there and got them, who audited them, and chronicled them. So the May post was an ex-post about the Fox News interview with Bongino. It has the headline. It says, the FBI, Fox News, just discovered that James Comey had a whole room of secret documents. We found it in the bags, hiding under James Comey's FBI. You're going to be stunned, said Dan Bongino. Dan said, there was a room in FBI headquarters and we found stuff, a lot of stuff, hidden from us, at least, and not mentioned to us, and then found stuff in there. A lot of it is from the Comey era. We are working right now to declassify. And just so you know, because I get the public, I totally understand people saying, well, do it now. We've been saying that for months now. The process is not all of the information is ours to declassify. Some is other intelligence agencies. We literally can't do it. Once that gets done, you read some of the stuff we found that, by the way, was not processed through the normal procedure, digitizing and putting it in FBI records. We found it in bags, hiding under Jim Comey's FBI. You're going to be stunned. We're waiting. Yeah. And Comey was indicted in September, and that was back in May. It's now November, almost December. Says Comey was indicted in September, and then shockingly, the charges were all dismissed yesterday. On charges of making false statements and obstruction of justice in August, Judicial Watch sued the Justice Department for records about James Comey. And then in May 23, they've been on this forever, trying to get some answers. So they submitted this lawsuit. It's not long. You can see here a couple short pages. Says Judicial Watch now brings this action against the DOJ. We want answers. It's our government. Plaintiff Judicial Watch is a not-for-profit educational organization. We want to promote transparency, integrity, and accountability and all the things. And as part of their mission over there, they regularly request records pursuant to FOIA from federal agencies. They analyze the agency's responses, they disseminate their findings, and then guys like me read it on the internet. Because we want to know what their government is up to. Exactly right, it's our government. If you're saying the FBI director was responsible for a massive fraud and trying to cover up evidence, that sounds like obstruction to us. So we'd like to see what was happening in those files. And you guys can help explain that to us and make a criminal referral if necessary before the statute of limitations expires. We've already seen this get very close to happening with James Comey, and it's irritating. So, and his case just got dismissed. So we'd like accountability before the clock runs out. Now, the DOJ is an agency of the U.S. government, is headquartered in Washington, and here are the facts. On June 2nd, Plaintiff Judicial Watch sent a FOIA to the FBI, a component of the defendant under the DOJ, seeking access to the following records. Anything that Dan Bongino referenced in his Fox News interview saying you're going to be stunned. All internal FBI communications between Dan and Kash as well. All directives sent out from the FBI to anybody about the documents and how it was handled. Now, the request was submitted back to the FBI on June 2nd, 25, this year. And we received an email that they got our request on the portal the same day. Oh, thank you, Tom Fitton. We love you. The FBI again acknowledged receipt of that request by a letter. June 17th, couple weeks go by. Okay, here's your tracking number. We're working on your FOIA request. That was back in June. Now, Judicial Watch has received no further communication from the FBI. Oh, how come? What are they up to? As of the date of this complaint, FBI, DOJ, Pam, Dan, and Kash, they have failed to produce the requested records or demonstrate that the requested records are exempt from production. They haven't notified us of the scope of any responsive records that they want to publish or any reasons from withholding these things. And so we're suing. They're violating the law, FOIA, under 5 U.S. Code 552. They say we're being harmed. We're going to continue to be irreparably harmed. We are now filing because we're trying to trigger the exhaustion requirement. They say they were required to make a final determination by at least July 1 to give us these records at the latest. And because Dan, Kash, and Pam failed to make a final determination within the time limits under the law, we have been deemed to have exhausted our options. There's nothing else we can do, been waiting around. And so therefore, Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton, we respectfully request that the court order the DOJ and the FBI to conduct searches for any records that we have asked. And we want you to let us know what methods you used that you thought would likely lead to the discovery of the records that we're demanding. So what do you have? How did you find them? And send them. Also, order them to produce by a certain date all the records and detail to us any of the exempt records that they are not going to give to us. Stop them from continuing to withhold these records when we make valid FOIA requests. Grant us attorney's fees and grant us other relief that we deem just and proper. Signed by Judicial Watch by Ramona Kotka, saying, can we please have the files, please? We'd like to see what went down over there because we have real concerns that there's not going to be any justice that occurs. If Pam and Kash have already lost the James Comey case just by points on the board, just how many points are on the board? 0. They got John Bolton for some classified documents, all of the Arctic Frost nonsense, all of the Jack Smith nonsense. The clock is ticking. And we'd like to see some accountability. So Kash got asked about this by Catherine Herridge. Shout out to her. She has a new podcast called Straight to the Point. She says, she asked Kash about this room, 9582, in a closet somewhere next to that guy from Office Space and the new J6 subcommittee. Said, Kash, she had like 27 minutes with Kash. And I will say this about the interview. He's getting much better at his FBI talking points, which basically are empty platitudes. But here's what Kash had to say with Catherine.
Let me ask you, when you learned about the discovery of the 5 burn bags here at FBI headquarters, what went through your head?
Shock. Unbelievable shock that not just one director and his leadership team, but multiple would have information that's supposed to be secured. Some of it's classified, but I mean secured for purposes of record-keeping purposes, to keep up with federal statutory requirements, because that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, so statutory requirements. So it sounds like some people are breaking the law. There are reporting and cataloging requirements, and FBI agents, including FBI directors, are responsible for that. That's their job. So shocked, I think, is the wrong answer, quite frankly. This guy wrote a book called Government Gangsters. Okay, gangsters. What do gangsters do? Well, they hide evidence and they obstruct the law. That's why they're gangsters. So the idea that you'd walk in there and be shocked about this is like, well, I can't believe this happened. You wrote a whole book about it, Kash. Why are you shocked about it? And they're obviously going to hide evidence. That's part of the reason we wanted you in this position, is because you were somebody who said, like, I know where the bodies are buried. I know where I can go find this stuff. So it really shouldn't be shocked. It should be outrage. It should be fury. It should be criminal referrals. And maybe I'm just being pedantic about this, but this is not the type of response that I think is shock doesn't necessarily lead to fury and prosecution. Because shock can come from just idiocy and incompetency. You did what? You put that thing in your car in that hole right there for what? If you're a mechanic or something.
And instead, they were deposited in bags listed for destruction. So that was very disturbing. Just that in and of itself, putting aside whatever was in there.
The burn bags were found in room 9582. That's a secure facility. I'm told by former agents that it would have some sort of access system or a key card system. Does FBI leadership have a good idea who put the burn bags in that room?
We do.
You know for sure, or you have a good universe of suspects? You know who put the burn bags there. What was the intent of the person who put the burn bags in room 9582? Was it to preserve them, to be discovered later, or to make sure they were destroyed?
Well, those are the questions we're answering for the public and for this investigation, because
well, you haven't answered those at all. So an answer better be coming, because it sounds like there might be some criminality. Now, Catherine Herridge is doing the right thing and saying, okay, so you know the identity of the person. We haven't seen any criminal referrals for obstruction or any related, maybe fraud crimes, right? You're trying to not report evidence. So some reporting requirements that Kash is obviously familiar with. So there's not a criminal referral, and so an investigation is open. So what is the intent of the person? Because intent might lead to criminality.
Not only are we not in the business of not exonerating people, but we're in the business of taking our investigative
okay, I'm going to have to just let this play because I'm going to melt down.
Findings and working with Congress to say, look, even though we did not or did reach a legal conclusion on the matter, this is of such public importance in terms of the weaponization of government that happened, people like President Trump were targeted, including myself.
Yeah.
And more senators that we just revealed, thanks to this FBI's work in uncovering not just the burn bag, but other material related to Arctic frost. What we want to do is find a public forum to display that information. And we believe that until our investigations conclude, we will be limited in what we can produce.
It sounds to me like you know the answer to that question.
I do.
That's what I thought. Okay. A highly classified CIA referral.
Okay, so he knows whether this person is a criminal or not, and he's going to continue the investigation to try to make that determination, and he's going to release the information to the public at some point because he was targeted and Trump was targeted. That's all great. Thank you for the book report and the recap. We're familiar with it. We've been covering it for a long time here. The question is about accountability and what is the remedy. And my follow-up is that person, are those people still working at the FBI?
Referral containing intelligence about the 2016 presidential election was also discovered here at FBI headquarters in a storage closet adjacent to the FBI director's office. How many FBI personnel had access to that storage closet?
That's part of this ongoing investigation, and because we are working through that, I don't want to disclose the number of folks or even who had access to it, because that goes to your other question on who put it there and why did they put it there, and were there any instructions associated with them depositing that material in these rooms.
Am I correct, based on my reporting, it is a very, very small universe of individuals who had access to that storage closet?
Very small.
Is it in fact only one?
It's very small.
Okay, so shout out to Catherine Herridge. She's dealing with Kash Patel, which is, obnoxious. But here is what we've covered before previously. Kash just came out and he said, we're not in the business of exonerating people at the FBI. Maybe in Kash's new FBI, they're not in the business of indicting anybody either, not anybody significant. They like to take credit for sheriff's drug busts and spray that around all over the place. But remember this was Arctic haze. And this was a series of 7 different FBI investigations. Each one of these in our mind map here is a different FBI investigation into themselves. This is the reason we're a bit irritated with Kash and Dan and them saying, just wait, everything's going to work out fine. Because we've already seen this historically. FBI, under the last administration and the last leadership of the FBI, Christopher Wray and James Comey, they investigated themselves 7 times. They opened up each one of these, Arctic Haze, Echo's Fate, Foggy Falls, all these little investigations. And they went into it and they said, oh my gosh, we got leaks coming from the FBI. What are we going to do? Let's investigate ourselves. And they did, right? What was the purpose? What was the initiation? Well, information was leaking to these articles here in the Washington Post, the New York Times, Devlin Barrett, Wall Street Journal. They investigated themselves in September 2021. The FBI, they were in the business of exonerating themselves. They didn't find anybody. You know who was responsible for it? Probably James Comey and Daniel Richman. These 2 dudes right here who were probably responsible for some of this burn bag material ending up in burn bags. So the FBI did that with Arctic Haze. Then they're like, oh, we can't find out where the leak is coming from. We're the FBI. We're so dumb. Let's open up another investigation. They did it for Echo's Fate. They opened up, they call it they give it a label. It's going to be Echo's Fate. They fill out these stupid forms and everything. They say more information is leaking again. Oh no, look at all this information leaking to the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, CNN. They conclude their own investigation of themselves. They love to investigate themselves, even when it's not appropriate. And they found, wasn't significant. Nobody gets charged. And the whole friggin' bureau just keeps moving on like nothing happened. Okay, this is why we're irritated about it, because this is the pattern. They did it again 7 times that we know of. This just came from leaks. So when they say that they're opening investigations and they're looking into things, Kash Patel, we just saw that he was talking to Thomas Massie. He said he didn't even read the case files when it was being asked about the pipe bomber and Epstein stuff. No. FBI, he can assure us, is doing a thorough investigation, but he's not reading the files because everyone else is reading the files, so that when he's asked about it, he can't answer anything because he says the other portions of the Bureau are doing the investigations. Now, you'll say, all right, well, maybe this is a new FBI and Kash and Dan are coming in and cleaning house. Well, that's interesting because the Gateway Pundit and Joe Hoft just posted this one a couple days ago. Reminder, 4 of the 5 FBI directors involved in Arctic frost are still in top positions at the FBI. Oh, isn't that fun? FBI leaders who oversaw Arctic frost, which we're going to look at more emails on this one, which James Comey and Jack Smith and all these people were facilitating. These were broad conspiracies against the president, saying, why is Kash Patel keeping around 4 individuals who were involved in Jack Smith's Arctic frost spy operation of Congress? They're still here. Aaron Tapp apparently is gone now, head of FBI San Antonio, but James Barnacle, Charlotte, still there. Joe Rothrock, Dallas, still there. Devin Kowalski, Puerto Rico, still there. Wayne Jacobs, on and on and on. Why is Kash Patel keeping around these people? We don't know. We learned this week that one of the 5 dirty cops at the FBI involved in Arctic frost was removed. Ken Delanian said Kash got rid of somebody. He was in there And they were spying on Republicans in huge numbers. So we'll see if Kash ultimately makes these changes or what is going on, but we're not seeing a lot of positivity thus far. These investigations have been going on for a long time. They're not responding to Judicial Watch. They're saying, can you please give us some records? They're saying, no, we're going to indict people. But indictments are expiring, and we're having to now battle with James Comey even being indicted.
Are the former GNI, James Clapper, and the former CIA director, John Brennan, and others in the clear?
Well, the FBI is not in the business of exonerating people.
You are, actually. Maybe the new FBI is not. The old one is. And so until we see a new pattern of behavior, we're going to presume it's the old FBI, especially when it's all of the same old FBI directors.
This FBI will be in the business of following the facts and the law. And as you've noted, and you followed greatly with our engagement with Congress, a number of these individuals, including the ones you've just listed, are being examined, and our scope of that will continue until we reach a finality of a conclusion.
All right. We'll see what happens. I hope that we do see some action, because currently nobody has been prosecuted for Arctic frost. And the one guy who was prosecuted for lying to Congress about a Trump coup was James Comey, and his indictment just got dismissed, and Pam Bondi couldn't even answer questions about it without reading from her card yesterday. So we've got this new report from MS Now. They say Trump is considering removing Kash Patel. White House is denying this unequivocally. But this is how the game is played. There's always whispers, and then they gauge reaction to the whispers while standing by their candidates. So Trump is considering removing Kash. Here's what MS Now says. It's capturing a lot of attention. A lot of even conservative accounts are reposting this on X right now, saying, whoa, Kash is in trouble because of this story reported by 3 people. It's MS Now. These people are, many of them, Ken especially, are hacks. So take it for what it's worth. But here is the whisper. Trump is considering removing Kash Patel in the coming months, as he and top aides have grown increasingly frustrated by the unflattering headlines he's recently generated. Under scrutiny for his jet and using his girlfriend's, his security detail to protect his girlfriend. Trump and White House aides have confided to allies that the president is eyeing removing Patel and is considering top FBI official Andrew Bailey, who is the co-deputy director with Dan. That is according to 3 people that they're hearing from. White House, again, I'll share with you, is refuting it unequivocally. Patel is described as being on thin ice. His ouster appears closer than ever, with Bailey as the logical replacement. 2 of the sources with knowledge said, though Trump could change his mind in the weeks to come. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson responded. They said, what? Here's their first comment. President Trump has assembled the most talented and impressive administration in history, and they are doing an excellent job carrying out the president's agenda. FBI Director Patel is a critical member of the president's team, and he is working tirelessly to restore the integrity to the FBI. Well, we hope so. Then Patel was present today at the turkey pardon, and Trump commended him, said he's very busy doing a great job, and people applauded Kash. Then Caroline Leavitt came out today and said, we stand by Kash unequivocally. In fact, we just took a picture together in front of the Constitution. In the Declaration of Independence, rather, it says here. Here, the story is completely made up, says Caroline. In fact, when this fake news was published, I was in the Oval Office where Trump was meeting with his law enforcement team, including Kash. I read the headline to the president and he laughed. He said, what? That's totally false. Come on, Kash. Let's take a picture to show them you're doing a great job. Here they are. Great job, Kash. We want Kash to succeed, but we are going to judge the FBI by its fruits, not by their media stings. And up until very recently, they were actually attacking. In fact, let's go over to their little account, FBI Rapid Response. Let's see what they are saying about all of this, because they were goaded into having releasing information on Thomas Crooks after Tucker and Miranda released information But now they're just basically, they were pretty quiet for a while over there. They came out swinging against Miranda and Tucker, and then they got pretty quiet. Then now they're saying at FBI Rapid Response, it's fake news. Kash is amazing. All right, so we'll see. Judicial Watch is saying they're not giving them the records that they're lawfully entitled to. These investigations can take forever. That's the point. That's the problem. That's why the evidence was put in the burn bags in the first place. So it would all be forgotten about. The investigations could take forever, and then they would escape any consequence because the clock would expire and count down. So we'll see what happens and how the DOJ responds. They can just hand over the files. We understand the nature of sensitive investigations and all of those things. We don't want to corrupt them, but we also want progress and accountability and transparency, which is what they promised us. And we're almost a year into this thing. So hopefully we start to see some results soon. We'll keep our eye on it. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. Now, let's turn our attention over to the Epstein matter, because we've got apparently some activity. Cops are now swarming the vault where the Epstein records are being housed. Apparently, a lot of internet conversations about these materials and where they're located. So some people on Reddit said, we're going to go stage some protest outside of the facility in Virginia and maybe insurrect the records out of there for the American public. And so this just came out. They said that from Fox News that the FBI has deployed police officers to guard a records facility where these materials are being housed. There's a Bloomberg report saying that the Bureau police that are normally at FBI headquarters were sent out to Virginia. It's a massive facility. The FBI has billions of pages of documents there. 256,000 square foot building. It's like that scene out of Indiana Jones. The additional security followed remarks by Mark Epstein, the disgraced financier's brother, who gave an interview, who said that Kash Patel is overseeing a cover-up of the materials. He had no evidence, but he said the files were being edited to remove the names of Republicans. Comments were widely shared online. Reddit users said, we're going to go and protest outside of Winchester. That would be a scene. Bloomberg, citing two people familiar with the internal FBI operation, said the Bureau viewed those discussions as potentially threatening and actually responded by bolstering protection at the facility. Earlier this week, lawmakers passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and now the DOJ is submitting additional documentation and motions to unseal more grand jury records in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. We talked about the Epstein filing, and Epstein is apparently dead, but Maxwell is not dead, and her files are still available. And she, of course, since she's alive, can object to the unsealing of the records. And so we've got some new orders that have come down from the judges in this effort, and we'll go through them. But first, here is the DOJ's filing. They sent this one in the Southern District of New York. The last one that we saw was down in Florida, but this one is in the Maxwell case. Epstein's dead, so he can't object to this, but Maxwell is not. She's still alive. And so the DOJ sent this one in, and the judge has issued a response. We'll get to next. Says, all right, Judge, we know that we just asked you to unseal the grand jury transcripts like a couple months ago, but we're back. Pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act and at the direction of Pam Bondi, the DOJ is back. We are respectfully filing this motion to ask you to unseal the grand jury transcripts and the exhibits in conjunction with the law. Now, the DOJ was here before. In fact, we asked you in July, due to extensive public interest, to unseal these records. We sent in a memo. We read all of that here. It was like, can you please, like token filings. The court denied the motion, concluding that the federal rules say these don't justify unsealing any of these records. But then something changed. On November 19th, just a week ago, Congress nearly unanimously passed the bill, and Trump signed it into law. There are certain enumerated exceptions, but except from those exceptions, the act requires Pam Bondi, the AG, within 30 days to make publicly available all unclassified records, documents, comms, investigative materials in the DOJ's possession, including the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's offices that relate to 9 topics, including Epstein and Maxwell. Now, the DOJ interprets this act as requiring us to publish the grand jury and the discovery materials in this case, the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Congress said so. So unless one of these permitted bases for withholding this applies, unless there's an exception, we got to release the files. Saying, accordingly, subject to appropriate redactions that are allowed by the Act, the DOJ files a renewed motion. We're now asking the court to unseal the records associated with the Maxwell case. We submit the following to you. On July 2nd, 2019, remember this, long time ago, Trump won. A grand jury sitting in the Southern District of New York indicted Epstein. The court entered a protective order. It said the government cannot post or cause any discovery to be posted anywhere. Very protective order on the Epstein case. Then Epstein committed suicide in his cell. Come on, DOJ, come on. Soon after, the court dismissed the indictment and the whole operation was over. Well, how convenient. So no evidence came out at all. Then on June 29th, the grand jury indicted Maxwell. Similarly, numerous offenses, but that's it. No one else. Nobody that Epstein was trafficking these people to got indicted. Just Maxwell, who was facilitating the trafficking. Saying here, the court, on consent of the parties, entered another protective order that said, don't talk about Maxwell either. Maureen Comey, James Comey's daughter, prosecuted both of those cases in her mop-up operation. Then in December 21, a jury found Maxwell guilty on several counts. We covered the whole trial here, and it was just highly limited to Maxwell. Nice little bow on it. Epstein's saga is over. Maxwell goes to prison forever. 240 months. And the Second Circuit later affirmed her convictions and her sentence, and the non-prosecution agreement that Epstein got that was applicable to basically everybody didn't apply to Maxwell. Now, the DOJ previously moved this court to unseal the records. The court denied that prior motion. There was no applicable exception under the federal rules of procedure. But then November 19th came around. President Trump signed into law the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and it relates to 9 categories of materials. 1, Epstein files, including all investigations, prosecutions, and custodial matters. And just to be clear, the 2019 indictment of Epstein is a big one. Going to be some good stuff in there, no doubt. But that's also going to be very limited to just Epstein. The big one that we want is the investigation back from 2007 by the feds and Alexander Acosta that ultimately resulted in a plea deal. They didn't pull, I don't think they actually convened a grand jury on that. We don't really know. But anything from that investigation, because apparently Epstein was beaten into taking the state level plea deal because he was facing a 50+ count indictment that was being investigated at the time. That's the real gold mine. Now, also, Ghislaine, they also want flight logs, itineraries, pilot records, vessels, vehicles, and other things. Any immunity or plea deals, any criminal activities or investigatory materials from those proceedings. Entities, corporate, nonprofit, governmental, academic, related to his networks. Any immunity deals for his associates. Internal DOJ comms, emails, memos, meeting notes, charging decisions, and more. All communications memos about anything that was destroyed, any evidence that you cataloged destroyed, any certificates of destruction, whatever. Documentation of Epstein's detention or death, including incident reports, witness interviews, medical examiner files, autopsy reports, and written records detailing the circumstances and the cause of death, which was a suicide. The dude was indicted for like 2 months. A lot of people get out of cut. James Comey's case just got dismissed in a couple of months. Epstein could have had that too. And he killed himself, one of the most powerful people on the planet. The act allows for certain withholdings and redactions. And so we don't want anything that's going to lead to an invasion of personal privacy or any of those things. And so all of those redactions must be narrowly tailored. And it says in the law, we are required to do these things, okay? They're saying, Judge, we are ordered. Congress ordered us. We don't even really want these things out, but okay, we're ordered to do it. 15 days and more. If we redact anything, we have to make a summary of the redactions that were made, why they were made. We have to report all this to Congress. So help us. Here, there are multiple features of the act that support an inference that they wanted these records released. And so first, the act expressly references this investigation. Congress is talking about you. They said they want everything from the FBI and the DOJ. That means everything. So that suggests that they're talking about grand jury materials. And we already tried to unseal the grand jury materials and they were denied. So presumably that means that they want those too. Now, the act also affects a categorical disclosure requirement. This makes the act, unlike the statute in the other case, permissible under the law. There's nothing in here that's in the act that says don't release things. And it shows a clear congressional intent to override some of the grand jury protections. We know that there are secrecy rules for a reason, to protect grand jury proceedings and their integrity, but Congress considered that, they overrode it. In light of the act's clear mandate, this court should authorize the DOJ to release the transcripts and the exhibits and modify any pre-existing protective orders that would prevent public disclosure under your court's orders. The DOJ will work to commit appropriate redactions where necessary, and we have 30 days, so we need an expedited ruling on this, signed by Jay Clayton, the new U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, who's taking over this investigation, November 24th, coming in. So once again, this is only for the Ghislaine Maxwell case, right? And the original 2007 investigation into Epstein, I think, is really where the mother lode is. And all of the cover up in the aftermath of that, all of the non-prosecutions, all of the looking the other way, every time new evidence crossed some FBI agent's desk, all of that will be very relevant. But in the Maxwell prosecution and in the 2019 Epstein prosecution, I think we could get all of the records. It's not even going to be consequential at all because Maureen Comey, the prosecutor, brought the case in that fashion. It was only for Epstein, just to take him out, only for Maxwell to clean that up. There's nobody else in there. Even during the trial, it was highly limited. So we didn't see much of anything come down there. Now, the judge got these requests and in the Epstein case issued that order. And in the Maxwell case issued this order. So in New York, Southern District, the judge responded and said, all right, listen, back in August, the court denied a motion from the Trump DOJ to unseal grand jury transcripts and exhibits. I already denied this. The court found that unsealing was not authorized by the rules of criminal procedure. And there were no special circumstances back then. Now, today, the government filed a new motion to unseal the transcripts and the exhibits again. It says that the Epstein Act authorizes these disclosures and we can redact victims' info. Now, the government also seeks a corresponding modification of the protective order in this case, and they want an expedited ruling. Now, the court, mindful of the act's requirement that the AG disclose responsive materials, he's saying, dang, the Congress ordered this. We now set a following schedule for responses. So, Ghislaine Maxwell, over to you. Ghislaine Maxwell will file a letter by December 3rd setting out her position for the government's proposed disclosures. So the question, of course, is will Maxwell object? Yes. And two, will that carry any weight adverse to Congress? They also want submissions from victims. As with its earlier motion, the government motion is silent as to the rights of the victims pursuant to the Crime Victims' Rights Act. The court directs the government to provide notice to all victims. And in this case, there were about 4 of them. In the Maxwell case, we heard from 4 women who said that they were, abused or a subject of the crime. The court directs the government to notify the victims. And if the victims want to be heard with respect to any of this stuff, you need to respond by December 3rd as well. Email your stuff to this email address, and the government must do the same as well. Any response by the government by December 10th. And so we'll get a ruling immediately thereafter. So that's in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. And we also had a very similar order come down in the Jeffrey Epstein case. Different judge over here. This one is Richard Berman. And of course, this one is over also in the Southern District of New York. This is the new case, not the Florida case. On August 20th, this court denied the DOJ's motion to unseal the grand jury records in this case. Epstein's dead, so we don't need to hear from him. Now, the government filed a second motion. And so we are scheduling the same. Noon by December 3rd, anybody from Epstein's representative on behalf of the deceased defendant Epstein, if he's really dead. Submissions from victims also shall come in. The government shall notify everybody on this one and then send that in. The government may respond to Epstein and victim submissions by noon on December 8th, and then we'll get a ruling on that one. Also, promptly coming down, according to these judges. So, some developments over there. We'll see what the judges ultimately do. Kash Patel, of course, was asked about this by Catherine Herridge last night over on Straight to the Point with Catherine Herridge. I encourage you to check her out on all the platforms and give her a subscribe. But here is her interview with Kash.
The Epstein Files Transparency Act has a very tight deadline, 30 days to produce unclassified records. Will the FBI meet the 30-day deadline?
Well, we are working with our partners at the Department of Justice to produce, as we've always committed to producing, what we can lawfully, legally produce. And we will continue to meet those metrics, reminding the public that there are court orders in place, protective orders, and orders to seal in place that legally prohibit the disclosure of information related to any investigation when there's a court order of that fashion. So we're working with DOJ to say if we can produce anything more.
As FBI director, will you commit to as few blacked out sections or redactions as possible?
We always do. We have in our productions to Congress, which have been historic to this year, and we'll treat every matter in the same fashion while also upholding always victims' rights. Victims' rights in any case, whether it's President Trump's case, this case, or any case, the victims' rights statutes are preeminent, and we will protect those victims at all costs.
President Trump told your boss, Attorney General Pam Bondi, to look into the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton. Is the probe limited to Democrats, or will you follow the facts wherever they lead?
We'll just follow the facts. It's pretty simple for this FBI.
So more charges are possible in the Epstein case?
Based on the new referral, we'll take a look at that and see what evidence comes. But there's an important distinction. The information that the government possesses versus the information that the Epstein estate possesses. Those are two separate boxes of information. And the Epstein estate has not been willing to share information with the U.S. government. And so even though we've requested them to do so.
All right. Well, they sent a bunch of information over to Congress via subpoena. That's what we were looking at when those emails emerged that Stacey Plaskett was texting with Epstein. So it doesn't sound like he's really interested in prosecuting anybody else. And Kash has been on the record in front of Congress saying that there is no evidence that there were any other third parties. He got asked that point blank. Based on what we have, there's no other evidence. So if they get a bunch of additional evidence, maybe that'll change the equation, but we'll see. The DOJ now asking the courts to unseal the records. Of course, I think that even if those records are unsealed, there's not going to be much in them, except from the Florida case. And we'll, of course, keep our eye on this one. But the saga continues. FBI now swarming around a facility where the records are being housed, DOJ trying to unseal them. Once these judges issue those orders, we'll be here to read those files. All right, now, my friends, we got one final update on the day. And then we'll hear from you on this lovely Tuesday. It's a beautiful Tuesday. The backdoor judge, Judge Dugan, loses motions in limine. We've got a trial scheduled coming up very soon in December, and we're battling out over the trial rules. What evidence can be introduced, what experts can testify about what items, and so on. And Dugan, who you may recall, used the back door of her courtroom to escape this dude, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, as you recall, tried to help him avoid any arrest by ICE officials, is now in the thick of it. Trial starting soon. Remember this security camera footage explaining what happened?
He meets his attorney in the hallway and walks towards Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan's courtroom. Along the way, he passes plainclothes federal agents who are sitting on a bench. They are there to detain him. After Flores Ruiz walks by, the agents turn to each other and appear to confirm his identity amongst themselves. But a few moments later, Judge Dugan and another judge approach the agents sitting on the bench. A criminal complaint against Dugan later said she was alerted to their presence by a court official. That complaint says during During this interaction, Dugan and the agents disagreed over the type of warrant they had to arrest Flores Ruiz. According to the complaint, Dugan ordered the agents to go to the chief judge's office. Video shows her pointing them through a double door. She then turns back to speak with other agents further down the hall and orders them through the doors as well. Shortly after that, with the agents gone from the hallway, Eduardo Flores Ruiz and his attorney exit into the hallway through a different door. As they walk down the hall toward the elevators, they pass another plainclothes federal agent. Neither they nor Judge Dugan seem to have noticed at the time. That agent motions to another to follow Flores Ruiz. Security video shows Flores Ruiz exiting through a basement exit. Upstairs on the 6th floor, the other agents have left the chief judge's office and worked their way downstairs. Flores Ruiz left the building onto 9th Street. Videos of the street shows the agents catching up to him. Flores Ruiz runs across 10th Street while trying to get away, but the agents catch him and arrest him.
And he has now been deported. So Flores Ruiz is afuera. Undocumented man, illegal alien, who, by the way, was a criminal defendant. He was in court for beating people. The victims that he beat were in the courtroom too, and she escaped him out of there because she would rather side with an illegal alien criminal defendant who allegedly beat the heck out of some people. That's why he was in court. So undocumented man, illegal alien, criminal defendant in a domestic violence case, tried to escape federal custody. And this is the pattern that exists, okay? If these judges and these courts would just detain them. Oh, you got charged with a crime in the United States and you're here illegally. You're automatically a flight risk. You're automatically somebody who needs to be detained pending immigration services. You're not in our country legally. The courts should never have let them out. That's why ICE has to go get them. If they would just detain them and do what's called an ICE hold, then you wouldn't have to go through this process. But this judge, as we're going to see, tried everything she possibly could to prevent him from leaving because she's got a soft spot for illegal aliens, especially when they kind of look like her. Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Dugan, Backdoor Dugan, was arrested in April and charged in a 2-count federal indictment, and now Ruiz is gone. They say after speaking to agents, she directed them to use her back door. He was arrested and charged and gone. ICE removed him a couple of weeks ago. And he's been in here twice. He's got a violent criminal history, including strangulation and suffocation, battery, and domestic abuse, this dude. And she's like, yeah, just use whatever door you want in my courtroom. Go wild. Trial is scheduled for December 15th. Motions have been flying back and forth. You see, we've got a new decision and order that's come down in the case, fresh out of the oven today. It's an order on a motion in limine. And these are motions that are submitted before the trial starts to help define what the rules of the trial are. You don't want to be duking it all out right in front of the jury about, well, we call this expert. Well, is he even an expert? What's he going to talk about? These things? Well, is that even relevant to this trial? You want to flesh those things out. No, he can't testify, or he can testify, but only about this and this and not about that and that. Figure it all out before the trial starts. And the judge just issued a big order on this one. And you can see we got 21 pages. And what's neat about this is that we can go through bit by bit and just look at the issues. Questions. Can we talk about the motives of law enforcement? We'll talk about it. Can we talk about a judicial warrant? What about an administrative warrant versus a judicial warrant? Can we have testimony about that? The judge decides for us. And here's how it goes down. In federal court, Eastern District of Wisconsin, in the prosecution of the backdoor judge, Hannah C. Dugan, she is now facing 2 counts. 1 count of concealing a person from arrest and 1 count obstructing homeland security. Saying the government, this is the judge writing, says that on April 18th, Dugan concealed an illegal using her backdoor. Case is scheduled for trial December 15th, just weeks away. Now, the government filed a consolidated motion in limine, saying we've got these 13 requests. When the trial starts, we'd like to have it go this way, as well as an additional motion to bar Doogie's expert testimony from coming in. So Doogie wants to bring in somebody to talk about the use of her backdoor, and the government is saying no. Prosecutors, no, we don't want to hear about any of that. So the judge is going to say, let's talk about each one of these issues. Number 1, first of all, The prosecutors are now moving to preclude the judge from mentioning potential punishment. That request is granted. That is a pretty standard request. You generally can't talk about the consequence. Like, you can't tell the jury, if you convict me, I'm going to prison for like 50 years. That doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with your innocence or guilt. That's a separate component of the trial. That's the penalty phase. So defendant doesn't object. DOJ just gets that in. Don't talk about it. We're just making that clear. She says we weren't going to anyways. Okay. So request is granted. Don't talk about the consequences. Jury nullification. Another standard request you'll see in many of these. The government also says, do not try to nullify the jury. All right. Including saying, well, immigration policy, like maybe you love illegal aliens, or immigration enforcement. You can't talk about government misconduct like, face masks, like ICE agents are out there with face masks, arresting people, kidnapping people off the street, like all of that stuff. Now, the defendant doesn't object to the government's request to prohibit her from arguing for jury nullification or appealing to jurors to decide the case on the basis of their personal views of immigration policy or enforcement. So we'll see how much tap dancing comes around, about that. It's like even just saying ICE agents were in our courtroom, like that alone, you might say, well, just call them government agents or government officials, because ICE already has a negative connotation. So I'm sure we'll be battling about that. Now, and we'll see how close Dugan's defense gets to that based on the makeup of the jury. They're going to try to get close to that. The government moves to bar discovery request or any commentary about discovery in the presence of the jury. Dugan says she is not opposed to the general idea of not arguing about discovery in front of the jury, saying, obviously, however, both parties will be commenting on discovery throughout the trial. For example, a question, answer, or comment during a trial that a document was produced by the government is proper and necessary. So with that understanding, the request is granted. So we're going to try to keep all discovery battles out of sight of the jury. Now, the government also moves to bar the defense, Dugan, from defining reasonable doubt. Now, the defendant does not object to that, but says, well, we can argue that the government hasn't carried its burden, and so their request is granted, right? So in other words, the judge can define the standard. The defense doesn't define the standard. Let the court do it. The defense says, of course, that's the court's job. Now, the government also moves to preclude Dugan from eliciting her own out-of-court statements. So she can't ask questions about things that she said outside of court because those would be self-serving hearsay, including self-serving statements that she made to police officers several days after the events at issue. She says, well, I want to call this cop to come in and testify, and I'm going to ask him about what Judge Dugan said. Objection, hearsay. The government says, no, those are out-of-court statements, and that's hearsay, and the rule of completeness would not require their admission. Now, Dugan says, I want those statements in. They're very good for me. She says that without additional context, it's difficult to respond on this point. She notes that out-of-court statements are not necessarily hearsay, and that statements offered for a relevant purpose other than the truth are not hearsay at all. The judge says, well, let me think about this. All right, so one of you wants to keep this out. The other wants to bring it in. Let's look at the law. Seventh Circuit has noted that defendants often try to justify their actions when talking to cops. And exculpatory statements don't have anything to do with the rule. So in those circumstances, the appropriate vehicle for that evidence is the defendant can take the stand. Okay, if you want those statements to come in, if you want to explain what you said to the cops, take the stand and explain it. Without knowing the precise statements that the defendant, Dugan, may want to introduce and why, I can't issue a definitive ruling now. But if you're going to introduce those statements, like if you're going to call a cop to the stand and say, what did Dugan tell you? You better explain a good reason for getting those statements in that are not hearsay, and then the judge will decide at the time. Now, what about the motives of law enforcement? Trump prosecutors want to stop any argument or questions about the motives of law enforcement. The defense team has claimed to reporters that this case was an attack on the judiciary, and this is politically charged. Trump is attacking the judges. The defense team also told reporters the government rushed to judgment in issuing the charges and then was stuck with going forward. The government says none of that is evidence that bears on the decision to prosecute. It's extraneous, it's collateral, and it should not be included at trial. Keep all of those length statements from Doogie's defense out. Now, Doogie objects to this request. She notes that the indictment alleges that agents plan to arrest this illegal in the hallway, but their plans apparently changed as they ended up arresting him outside the courthouse. Well, their plans changed because she diverted them and then let the illegal use the back door. But this defendant, Doogie says, this action, in other words, that they arrested him outside, says it puts the agent's intentions and motives at issue. She further says that the government made a rushed charging decision, which required the agents to attempt to fit their investigation into a previous charging decision. Says to the extent that the agents deny their plan changed, Dugan should be able to demonstrate and explain why they are motivated to change their stories. Now, the judge says, I'm interpreting this argument, and I don't understand Dugan to argue that she should be permitted to argue to the jury that the prosecution is politically motivated. Citing some other law, both sides will be allowed to present relevant evidence about what happened and why. And I guess they can talk about their motives, but I don't even understand Dugan's real attack strategy here. The reason they arrested them outside the courthouse is because you escaped him from the building and diverted them, taking them into the judge's chambers to distract them from doing their jobs. Now, the indictment also says that Judge Dugan falsely told ICE agents that they needed a judicial warrant to arrest this illegal alien. A judicial warrant. You hear this talking point over and over. The government says she shouldn't even be able to talk about that, from arguing that a judicial warrant, as opposed to an administrative warrant, is needed to make an arrest in a public hallway. Now, the government says evidence will show that Dugan had reason to know that an administrative warrant was sufficient, right? The judge was just throwing her considerable weight around. I'm a judge. You know you need a judicial warrant for that. They said, no, we're ICE agents. We know we don't. We have an administrative warrant. It's right here. Get out of our faces. Now, Dugan objects. She says, I want to talk about this judicial warrant thing, noting the government made this an issue by alleging she committed obstruction by confronting members of ICE and falsely telling them that they needed a judicial warrant to effectuate the arrest. The indictment also alleges that Dugan knew a warrant had been issued. Evidence of what Dugan knew will overlap significantly with what was actually true. Now, Dugan does not actually present contrary authority on the issue of whether a judicial warrant was actually required here, but the indictment does make what defendant knew relevant. Both sides should be permitted to present evidence on that point. So we can talk about, probably will, the difference between judicial and administrative warrants in the trial. And we'll see how she explains that. Now, the government seeks to bar evidence or argument about her arrest or alluding to alternative means of bringing her to court, arguing that the only purpose would be to invite jurors to be mad at the government. She says, I want to talk about how I was arrested because it discredits the caliber of the investigation. Now, in the briefing on her motion to dismiss, even Dugan, in a footnote, they say, even Dugan says, assuming she said what the government claims about the judicial warrant, even they admit Dugan probably was wrong about whether ICE and an administrative warrant meets the Fourth Amendment muster, but it's not entirely settled. Dugan probably was wrong about whether ICE warrants are valid, but it's not entirely settled, right? So she's probably wrong. They're even admitting it. So defendant should be permitted to challenge the integrity of the investigation. However, it's unclear why this would include evidence about her arrest. It doesn't. Absent further explanation, the government's request will be granted. So they're just, well, she was arrested. She's a judge and they were mean to her. Does that have any relevance to whether she escaped this illegal alien or not? No, it doesn't clearly. Now, the government moves to bar evidence or comment about the duration of the investigation. They say it has nothing to do with reasonable doubt. The government notes that members of the defense team have told the media this was a rush to judgment. The government says, no, it wasn't. The evidence will speak for itself. The jury will either agree or disagree about the guilt. Evidence or comments about the short interval, like they went real fast, it's not even relevant to the facts that are being presented. Now, Dugan objects. She says, I must be permitted to discredit the caliber of the investigation and the charging decision. She says the haste is relevant. It goes to bias. It goes to accuracy of fact-finding, the quality and the reliability of the investigation. The judge says, kind of difficult to rule on this one in the abstract. As indicated, defendant should be permitted to challenge the integrity of the investigation. However, I am disinclined, the judge says, to allow this trial to become a trial of the investigation. Under 403, rule we're very familiar with, which is if it's more probative than it is prejudicial, if it's more helpful than it is harmful, we let it in. If it's more harmful than it is helpful, we keep it out. The court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of confusing the issues. If it misleads the jury, if it causes undue delay, or if it wastes time, we keep it out. So we'll have to figure that out at trial, and that will be coming soon. Now, the government also moves to bar any argument from Dugan that Dugan should not be convicted because she didn't succeed in preventing the arrest. Well, you got him anyways. You caught him outside. In other words, the defense may attempt to argue no harm, no foul. Such comment should be disallowed because neither of the statutes charged in the indictment requires that Dugan succeed in escaping in order to be convicted, or that law enforcement could have changed the location of the arrest. The government cites authority that neither of the charging statutes require success in the concealment of the person or in the obstruction of the proceedings. Now, she says, well, it does. She referred to her proposed jury instructions, including an element of materiality. Now, the government says that Dugan corruptly endeavored to obstruct this, to assist this guy to evade arrest in the hallway. She is going to argue she's not guilty. One reason she's not guilty, contrary to the indictment, is that at least by the time he emerged into the hallway, and maybe before, there was not a plan to arrest him in the hallway that she could have corruptly endeavored to obstruct. Now, the arguments that may be made to the jury will depend on our final instruction. Those are not finalized yet. And Doogie will be permitted to present evidence and argument that she did not endeavor to obstruct the arrest of this illegal. Now, I will otherwise defer to the ruling on number 10 at this time and a couple more. We've got the government says we don't want evidence coming in of other ICE enforcement actions, saying you can bring it in to impeach a witness or show bias, but all of the other arrests don't have any relevance to this arrest. She says, I do. I want to explain how there were evolving policies set forth and it was impacting her thinking. Now, I agree with the defense that the evidence may be relevant to her mental state, and so she can talk about that. She can say they were arresting everybody, and so I was just trying to explain, come over here, and this is our new policy or whatever. The government also says that we want to keep out any evidence of her good motives, whatever those are, saying all of that will just mislead the jury. She says she does not know what evidence the government seeks to bar here. She intends to elicit evidence and make arguments about her state of mind. The government must prove she had corrupt motives and a corrupt intent. Her motives are relevant. So absent more specifics, I can't rule on this one either. And more. The government wants to get rid of her prior good acts, saying she might try to introduce evidence like she puts her shopping cart away, she opens the door for her mother. The government argues this evidence is inadmissible. You can't just bring in a bunch of good character evidence. The defense says, I don't even know what you're talking about. We haven't even wanted to introduce any good acts evidence. And so the judge says, well, I'll just defer on this. If evidence pops up, we'll make a decision at trial. Similarly, prosecutors want to exclude expert testimony. They want to bring in an immigration lawyer about the meaning of certain statutory and regulatory terms. The government says the meaning of the term proceeding is a question of law. Okay, that's your decision, judge. You decide these definitions. not some other people come in and define what the law is. That's your job. Now, the Seventh Circuit, the judge writes, has consistently held that type of testimony can be excluded. The court was correct in noting that the meaning of words are for the judges, not for legal experts. The only legal expert in a federal courtroom is the judge. Dugan wants to come in and bring in this expert. This is the big one. Saying, we need this person to explain all this. She says, we don't believe the government can factually satisfy the requirement, and so we need this testimony to come in and explain what the law is. But the judge says it is unclear how the proposed expert will provide evidence as to the facts. The government has indicated it will have ICE witnesses provide lay testimony describing where the issuance and the execution of the warrant was and how that fits into his overall immigration proceedings for this illegal. Judge says, I will, at the final pretrial, we have another hearing coming up, discuss this with the parties, permissible defense testimony, including the proposed expert on this issue. And so sounds like that one may not be coming in, but we'll see. Now, in her first motion, Dugan also, so that was from the prosecutors. Now Dugan is responding, saying she wants an order that the government cannot rely on her lawful official acts to sustain the charges. She's renewing her immunity motion, which she already lost. In her second motion, she makes 12 additional requests. Number one, Dugan argues, she says lawful acts, if I can lawfully do it, that's not obstruction. Saying the government cannot introduce any of those things, and the government may not contest that they were even official acts. She cites a couple cases, and the court cites those for us. She says she had a legal right to do everything she did. All 5 actions alleged in the indictment were within her authority to do so. So you can't use those against her, basically renewing judicial immunity. Now, as the government notes, her motion in limine would in effect confer partial judicial immunity. Judge says, I agree. The correct approach is to permit the jury to consider all of the conduct. Doogie loses again in deciding whether she concealed an alien or whether she corruptly endeavored to obstruct. The cases that she is relying on don't suggest differently. As the government notes, construing the term corruptly to require wrongful conduct, non-immunity cases placing official judicial acts outside the scope of the statutes is the interpretation. Now, the judge says, as I noted in denying her prior motion on this issue, there is no basis for granting immunity simply because some of the allegations in the indictment describe conduct that could be part of a judge's job. In the bribery cases, for example, judges who were convicted of bribery, they used judicial acts or tools to carry out their bribery. That doesn't mean they can't be prosecuted for bribery. So the judge says, I'm not considering my previous ruling on the immunity issue. You've already lost that, and any official, unofficial distinction would be inconsistent with my prior ruling. Now, you're free to present evidence that you were doing your job, and the government will be allowed to say, well, that's not exactly your job, okay? Those are extraneous activities to your duties. You're exploiting your job in order to commit your obstruction, and so Dugan is denied. Another very big one on that one. So second motion says the defendant moves for sequestration, very standard defense request. All non-party witnesses need to be excluded from the courtroom. Government doesn't object. They don't care. As long as their case agent is there, pretty standard. In other words, you don't want witnesses to listen to other witnesses. Person A comes in, talks, person B sitting in the courtroom, person B comes up, just having listened to person A, testifies in conformity with their testimony, then you can't identify any irregularities between the two or any inconsistencies. So you preclude people, kick them out of the courtroom, they can't even listen to it, then bring them back in. Doogie also asks for jury instructions be provided in written form. Government says no problem, that's granted. Dugan moves to prohibit the government from introducing character evidence of other crimes. Government doesn't object. They say we're going to do that anyways. Granted. Dugan moves to prohibit the government from introducing testimony that would create a mini trial The government says, we agree. We don't want a mini trial on these rules. However, how you handled Judge Dugan, this illegals hearing, and whether it was routine or business as usual is relevant to her intent. The government says that this illegal was charged with battery and his alleged victims were in the courtroom. Okay. The judge continued the case. The victims didn't even get to be heard or witness anything. She violated their rights as victims. How she handled this case off the record without notifying the victim or the prosecutor is all relevant. Whether the treatment of this victim was routine or an aberration is relevant to her state of mind. Does she always just ignore the victims who were sitting in her courtroom? Similarly, whether the treatment of these victims was consistent with the guidance she received is also likewise relevant to her intent. Marcy's Law, which is presumably some victims' law in Wisconsin. Does she always just ignore victims who were seated in her courtroom while criminal defendants are getting shown the door? I will permit, writes this judge, the government to introduce evidence about whether Dugan handled this case in a customary fashion. This would seem relevant to her intent and to the position she has taken throughout these proceedings that all of the charged acts were done in the ordinary course of a judge's duties. She doesn't do this often or at all. However, I will exclude, pursuant to Rule 403, the balancing test, evidence or argument that Dugan violated victims' rights laws in Wisconsin. The probative value is substantially outweighed by confusing of the issues, and it's just not relevant here. This is a federal case, not a state-level Wisconsin case. And other cases say we can talk about training evidence and other things. Now, Dugan also moves to stop the government from talking about whether anyone personally believes she is guilty. The government says, that's fine. Okay, no problem. Just as long as you don't do it, they say we won't. Dugan moves to prohibit the government from eliciting undisclosed expert testimony. Government doesn't oppose that, so that's granted. And Dugan wants to stop the government from eliciting expert testimony to talk about valid administrative warrants. The government says no expert opinion would be appropriate on whether it's valid. That's up to the judge. And the government does indicate that it will have witnesses from ICE who are going to come and testify about how they created the warrant and how the warrant fit in to his entire immigration proceeding. But the government is not calling any experts to explain what the law is, so that appears to be moot. Now, Dugan also moves to stop the government from using expert testimonies from the court procedures. The government says, well, any testimony from witnesses about court procedures will not be expert testimony that is outside the ability of jurors to comprehend at all. Rather, it's going to be factual observations. The government also says that such observations and perceptions are relevant to Dugan's intent in this case, given her filings and statements that she did nothing wrong. She's going to say it's business as usual. We want people in the court to explain why it's not business as usual. So as indicated, I'm going to give the prosecutors some leeway to demonstrate that this case was handled in an unusual fashion. It appears that evidence offered in the form of lay opinion, in other words, like a security guard says, yeah, this was weird. Everything was weird. As the government intends to call no expert witnesses, this also appears to be moot. Now, Dugan wants to introduce evidence from Pam Bondi and from Kash Patel. She says these statements are admissible because they're statements from a party opponent that show bias. The government says neither Bondi or Kash are going to testify. And so judge says, without more, I agree with the government that Dugan should not be permitted to inject national political figures into this trial. Good call, judge. Any slight probative value of this evidence is outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. They want to come in here and scream about Kash and Pam the entire time. Make this case about Trump rather than the evidence. The judge is not allowing it. Good call. Now, Dugan moves for an order requiring the government to produce full transcripts and audio recordings. The government says, well, we're going to produce finalized versions soon anyways. And so the judge says, great, this should be moot. I'll address this at our final setting. Dugan also wants an order allowing her to introduce complete recordings. And the judge says, I'll make decisions at trial. She also wants, lastly, an order requiring the government to produce grand jury materials at least 2 weeks before trial. Government has no objection, therefore it is granted. And so, in conclusion, it is ordered that the government's consolidated motion is granted in part, and the government's motion to prohibit expert testimony also granted in part. So, bunch of big wins for the prosecution here, signed by the district judge, Lynn Edelman. So the big one, of course, is that she can't come in here and bring in some expert to explain what the law is. The judge says, we're keeping that out. And other evidence can come in. And a lot of the bad stuff that she wanted to bring in is being kept out. So trial coming soon, December 15th. And we're getting the rules laid out. Jury selection will start and then will be underway. Now, this is acting ICE Director Todd Lyons saying here, we are removing illegal aliens from our country. It has to happen. And whether it's Trump ending TPS status for the Somalians or ICE officials arresting criminal illegal aliens outside of court hallways, they got to go. Here's Todd Lyons.
Hey, Rob. Good seeing you again. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so, ICE, obviously, we enforce the laws the way they're written, right? And so if someone's temporary protective status is lifted, which it's happened many times to different various countries and nationalities, but we're ready to take action, and that's what we do, right? When someone's temporary protective status is lifted, they are now illegal aliens. They're here in the country illegally, and we will go ahead and remove those criminal elements out of our neighborhoods.
Well, what was your reaction when you saw the details of the fraud inside of this community and just surreal what we've brought into our country?
One thing for me, Rob, is the fact that when you think about what TPS is actually created for, right, what the asylum process is created for, when you think about how many people take advantage of that, when there's so many individuals that want to come to the United States for a better life, yet there's so many people that criminally come here and use fraud or other fraudulent means to enjoy the American dream, it takes away from those individuals that really want to be here lawfully, right? So we do have to remove those elements out of here. And if temporary protective status is lifted for the Somali community, whether it's Minneapolis, could be Philadelphia, could be anywhere, we're going to go ahead and remove those elements out of our country, because at that point, especially the game here under false pretenses, that's what ICE does as a law enforcement mission. We have to ensure that we remove those people from our communities.
Yeah.
And even if you've got backdoor judges trying to escape them out their back doors, those ICE agents can run and they'll track them down right on the streets. And at least this guy is now gone. Undocumented illegal alien, arrested, deported, removed, and Dugan scheduled for trial for letting him use her backdoor. We'll keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right. What a beautiful day it has been. Thank you for being here, my friends. Quick recap. If you are just joining us, 3 good segments on the day. FBI now being sued for the burn bag materials, courtesy of our friends at Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton over there, which is good news. We read through some of that. The lawsuit itself, the FOIA request has been pending for quite some time, and now we'd like to see some records. Kash Patel was out talking with Catherine Herridge, not answering a lot of questions about this, but apparently he knows who moved the files in there. And our question is, who did it? Are they going to be charged for obstruction or what? And we see that Kash was being questioned about his future at the FBI, but the Trump White House is standing by him, saying any rumors of Kash's demise are sorely mistaken. So we talked about that. Then we went over to Epstein and saw how the DOJ submitted some additional filings to unseal the grand jury materials now that the Epstein Transparency Act has passed. Ghislaine Maxwell has about a week to respond, maybe 2, to decide whether she objects to these materials. And of course, same with the Epstein estate. And then we talked about the backdoor judge Dugan, who has lost some pretty big issues in her final motion in limine battle. Trial scheduled just a couple weeks from now. And of course, we're going to keep our eye on all these stories. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. And happy Thanksgiving week, my friends. Hopefully you're having a good one. and your appetite is warming up, if it's not already here. We had some great donos that happened today, my friends. Thank you for sending these in. And a bunch of new membos coming in as well. What a glorious day it is. Look at this. Look at this interesting looking turkey right here. Makes interesting sounds. A little unusual. Probably doesn't taste as good as a normal turkey either. Save a turkey, eat a taco. From Muffin Rando. And then when you're done with your tacos, eat a turkey. Trump said, hey, what's up? Trump said 3550 says, you effing rock, brother. Salute, stay strong. From Trump said. What a nice comment, Trump said. Man, I appreciate that. You effing rock too, brother. We appreciate that. Thank you for saying that, Trump said. Makes a man feel good. Says Mock Schnell, what's up? 13 months as a membo. Hey, Mock Schnell. Baker's dozen as a membo. Just popping in, sending out some membos for Thanksgiving. You were still the best, Rob. Thank you, Mock Schnell. Really nice of you to say that. And really even nicer of you to bring in 50 membos, courtesy of Mock Schnell. Look who's here. Let's welcome him. Welcome him in. Psychological Projectionist is here. We got Gary Baines. What's up? The Real Hydro PX. We got Eugene Sands is here. Jem Mako. What's up? Sell You Light Podcast. Shay's here. Princess Chelsea. We got Michael Kelly. Diana from Florida. What's up? Summer Walkabout. Fred Pye. Turk Scaton. We got Frank Williams. Dub Hill. Merc Mercy. Greg B. What's up? MX Mama's here. We got this one from Craven Vale. Boardwalk. Penny Hardenberg. Big Howard, what's up, Johnny Fultz? Acid Bird is here. Nonners, All About Ford, M151. Eugene Sands is here. Lawrence Ked. We got A Series of Bets. John TC, Ron Levy. What's up, Yorkie kids? Taz Mocan, Brian Moore, Janice Camp, Mike Sutton. All gifted membos, along with Rumpel, Ann Ruse, Vape FPV, Rosie, D-Rock, what's up, Tambucci? We got Butt Coffee First is here. The Voice of Patriarchy, Anti-Vio, Colin Boyer, Kyle, Shy Magic, Princeless, Mickey, Raider, Nick, and Jedi825, all gifted membos courtesy of Mock Schnell. Mock Schnell, you're amazing. New membos, grab the members only stream from this morning. It was a beautiful members only stream. Check that out. Welcome aboard, Mock Schnell. Thank you for doing that. That's a bunch of membos. We're grateful for you. Welcome, new membo friends. Hey, old guy is here. All right, let's see what this one says. Okay, Birnbag, Comey, and others in the deep state won't get jailed. There will be more awareness, but the beast is so metastasized in this government and U.S. society. No jail time nor true reform. Global reset setup. MAGA won't vote in the midterms because they are too butthurt. Yeah. Well, we're not just cheerleaders who just like cheer for the team. We want an actual functional government. We're not just Democrats who just don't really care as long as their guy wins. Like Team Blue, no matter who. Joe Biden, dementia, they don't care. We want a functional government, and I don't want to be a part of the uniparty. So if our Congress people are going to be pathetic, why should we donate to them? Why should we vote for them? Yeah, I know the Democrats might win. We got it. But the Republicans are not doing anything. They're acting like Democrats light. So we want an actual real country. You know, I'm just tired of settling for, like, Trump was supposed to be this massive wave of reform. And if they're going to not do that, then we need to find an administration that will. I'm not saying we're there yet, by the way. I think that we're still very early in this. I know a lot of people have already abandoned ship. And I'm like, it's the first quarter, everybody. Like, we got a lot of runway left to go in this game. So, you know, but I can understand people. It's like one after another, people are getting disillusioned and frustrated with, especially after yesterday, like the despair after Comey and Letish got dismissed, like, And I don't think that's Pam and Halligan's fault, to be honest with you. I think that judge, I think those cases are coming back. But Comey just got dismissed. It's like, ugh. They have to fight to get that case back. So people are going to check out, you know, if you're not winning, it's not very fun. If you're getting obliterated, it's not fun. But I also think I'm still optimistic about the administration and where we're at. We've had some very good wins, and a little course correction is okay. We want a little course correction and to get get second term jitters out of the way before things really get going. Hey, Rick D says it's official. Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, has been referred to the Secretary of Navy for investigation and potential recall. Briefing is due 10 December. Here's the memo, November 25th, memo for Secretary of the Navy. Potentially unlawful conduct by Mark Kelly. The Department of War recently received information about potentially unlawful comments by Captain retired Mark Kelly in public on video on or about November 18, 25. I am referring you this and any other related matters for your review, consideration, and disposition as you deem appropriate. Please provide me a brief on your review no later than December 10th, 25. Signed there. I think that's Pete B. Hegseth in the signature. All right, Mark Kelly. Yeah. He can go answer questions about his sedition. Thank you, Rick D. 200 Watt Studio says, Kash wants a public forum? That's the courts. Well, he keeps saying that, like we're being transparent and delivering information, but nobody is feeling that at all. So you can say it as many times as you want, but unless we get some indictments and some release of information, like you might know these things, but the clock is ticking. One old guy says MAGA only votes every presidential cycle. Socialist Democrat, well, that's because Trump is energizing. The rest of the Republican Party is just not, unfortunately. Socialist Democrat and Sharia law pushers know how to vote in special elections. Yeah, they can deliver. Midterms and local elections, MAGA doesn't. Whatever happened to the Tea Party? They became MAGA. Yeah, I don't really know exactly what happened to the Tea Party, but that was like an interesting phenomenon. And yeah, I think people are fighting for the future of MAGA. What is it? And I think it's a similar future. Well, it's a fork in the road. Is it America first or is it Bush neoconism? Which way, Western man? Rick D, thank you for that, double O guys. We appreciate that. Very nice donos. Thank you for sending those in. Rick D, a DOJ employee has just been charged with terrorism after allegedly doxing Border Patrol agents to a man who wanted to kill the agents. Wow. Karen. Her name's Karen. Charged with terrorism. Many Karens should be charged with terrorism for terrorizing society. Shout out to all of our Karens out there. But yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Rick. The DOJ and the FBI are probably filled with these people. Hey, double O guys, none of this can be fixed from the top down. It always comes from the bottom up. MAGA is too foolish to figure that out. It depends on who you're defining as MAGA. There are, some foolish people who I think would take that label and run with it, but they're not really MAGA. It always starts at home, not from inside the devil den, the DC Beltway. Well, I think that's true. I mean, I think that Trump was reelected based on the energy of the people. It was from the bottom up. Trump had the support of the population. And if you don't continue to nurture and cultivate that support, it will evaporate. So I don't think that MAGA is foolish. I think we figured that out. We're just disappointed with some of the way that some of the policies that we cared about, like H-1B, foreign wars, foreign funding, all of those things are, concerning. Sarcasmo. This is frustrating, but so am I. Ask my wife. Well, this is frustrating, but so am I. Ask my wife. Hey, John Allen. Asking about wedding gifts. Hey, thank you, John. I'll take a look. Yeah, thanks for asking about that. I'm not sure. We got a whole list on that, so we'll have to check. But thanks for asking about it. And thank you for sending a gift in. Object Class Keter, if they say that she isn't guilty because it failed, we'll have a dangerous precedent. Attempted murder, robbery, theft, etc. Imagine if that became the norm. Yeah, we made that point. What if she was just sitting on the bench and she says, I now sentence you to death and just shoot you in the head? She's a judge. She can sentence people for things. Maybe that's that. Object Class Keter, Rick D. Wow, news is breaking that the UK, that Justice Secretary David Lammy has suspended trial by jury, except in very special cases. What? Oh, gosh. UK is gone. Thank you for that, Rick D. Object Class Keter, 26 months as a membo. 1 more month until baby number 3 in the house. Thank you, Object Class Keeter, for that. 26 months, man. 1 more month until baby 3, because 9 times 3 is 27. I'll have to take your word for it. Mizzy M, thanks for keeping up with it all, Rob. Have a great Thanksgiving with the fam. Thank you, Mizzy M. Thank you, Mizzy M, for that. Elaine Membla says, looking good. Married life suits you, does it? I feel like a married man now. Thank you, Elaine. Elaine MBLA in the house. Elaine Blah in the house. Good to have you. Woods Precision Arms just became a member. Woods Precision Arms, good to see you again. Welcome back. Grab that members only stream from this morning. And 200 Watt Studio says, Mark Kelly forgets that Benedict Arnold also was a war hero and well respected until he went treasonous. Mark Kelly. Yeah, maybe so you're saying maybe Mark Kelly is going to follow in Benedict Arnold's future and path? Good comments. My friends, thank you for sending those in. Welcome to our new membos. Amazing to have you. Membos, grab the members only stream from this morning. Sergeant Bob over on Locals today says, hey, let us not forget the legacy of corruption was started by J. Edgar Hoover. He assembled files on presidents, senators, representatives, and others. He essentially blackmailed them very tactfully. He had dirt on JFK, Bobby, and others. This culture continued. The Watergate burglary was done by a former FBI agent who was very experienced in doing black bag jobs as an FBI agent. Hoover's successors, including former Kansas City Police Chief Clarence Kelly, could not overcome the culture and truly reform the organization. Finally, there is opportunity. Good agents want this. Those remaining from the corrupt culture do not. Can Kash measure up? Says Sergeant Bob. Yeah, that's a good question. Good question. Sadie says, Miss Lucky was just watching a movie, Mark Felt, starring Liam Neeson. Opening was about Hoover's death, 1972. All his files he kept and cataloged on people. Yeah, the FBI was birthed out of corruption. Christie, I'm filing for a federal pardon for old white-collar crime, paid restitution in full. What are my chances? Low. Is it a big case for some reason? Do you know senators? Have you donated a bunch of money to some politicians somewhere? I hope it's high, but a federal, like a presidential pardon it's a pretty heavy lift over there. Yeah, pretty heavy lift. John says, I'm trying to talk myself into taking methylene blue. Well, just watch Alex Jones for an episode, and then you'll be convinced. That's how he gets so Alex Jonesed. It's all that methylene blue right into the veins, probably. So, my friends, it has been a beautiful stream. Let's say hello to our friends on X on the day, and then we'll wrap it up on the night. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow. So, schedule for the weekend, for the rest of the week. We're planning on one stream, early streams, Wednesday and Friday, probably Thursday on Thanksgiving. But Mama G is coming up, and so we'll have to confirm that with her. What's up, my friends? Neuro D is over on X saying, give Rob a follow over on Rumble. Man, look at that. Look at those faces we're putting on these thumbnails now. Aren't they just amazing? James Pepper X kicked me off earlier today for criticizing Mark Kelly. He's running for president in 28. He thought this was his way to get there. Yeah, maybe that's what this is all about. Fundraising or something. James Pepper shared this one. Last month, they were lobotomizing pumpkins. Now they're shoving bread up turkeys' butts. This planet has issues, Bert. It is interesting, some of the things that we do as humans. Tibarama. What's up, Tibarama? Happy Thanksgiving to you. And the FBI has now joined the chat. Hello, fellow radicals. Who would like to blow something up? We'll pay for it. And all the things. All right, so my friends, we will wrap it up and we'll leave it there. We've got one more comment. Woods Precision Arms says Kash is an utter disappointment. We hope that there's a little bit of a course correction or something's going on, but we can only hear there's ongoing investigations so much, especially after we're losing indictments. which I think are coming back, but we want to see some progress. And so like the talking and the talking and the talking, we barely got Comey indicted after 5 days because Trump was screaming at Pam Bondi about it. And they're not that interested in, I think, these matters, quite frankly. They're just way more interested in moving forward. Nobody wants to look backwards, by the way. It's a hard thing to do. You'd rather just come in and fix the new problems. How much do you like a new problem versus an old problem? I'm very guilty of this. I'll look for a new problem so I can spend my time on that rather than going and fixing an old problem, because a new problem is just a lot more interesting. So that happens in our government. We have a lot of old problems to fix. We don't have a justice system if we have criminals who are running it. It's not good. So we are not abandoning ship, but I think just like a sports team, you can say, hey, bro, like I need you to step it up. We got 4 quarters left in this game. I need you to really pick it up. Focus. Double O guys, man, what a nice comment. Double O guys says the UK was cooked from the inside out. MAGA is truly foolish. This old guy says bottom up is local elections and midterms. Socialism, Dems, and Sharia law lovers relies on MAGA to never vote local and midterms. They hold strong, but MAGA's flesh is weak, and so is their spirit. Well, I think that I would consider myself to be a part of MAGA. We want to make America great again. We were supportive of the Trump administration. I don't feel like we're weak. We vote. We do all those things. I think that many of so I don't know who you're talking about when you keep saying MAGA is weak. If you say, MAGA Congress people who claim to be MAGA, there's a bunch of elected officials and, influential people who have positions of power who can do things, who all rode the MAGA coattails. They were MAGA, MAGA, MAGA constantly, wearing the hat and everything. But when it's time to vote, when it's time to impeach somebody, when it's time to pass some legislation, they have both houses and they can't do hardly anything. Those people are weak. And actually, I don't think that they're actually really MAGA. I think that they're just using this as cover. They cannot wait to get back to their neocon ways. You saw the headline that the Bushes were coming back or trying to reinstitute some sort of new return to power. Okay, that's not MAGA. That's just they're globalists. They're globalists. Many of them are just oligarchs. And so I think from our perspective, we were hoping that this last election would create this new wave and this political realignment such that the Republican Party would get behind a more America First principles and ideas. But that has not happened as far as we can tell. So we got a lot of clock left in the game. We got 3 quarters left. So I don't think it's useful to just abandon ship already and we're done. I think that won't be actually useful. We want to, as players on the same team, nudge our best players to do better. And that's just what any sporting team does. It's just normal. Doesn't need to become personal and turn into a bloodbath. We don't need to be canceling everybody and throwing everybody out of the party and stuff for basic disagreements about policy and who's talking to whom. But yeah, we've got a lot of issues. Fixing our elections is another big one. Mama Pillow, it's a big one. We've had some good wins with immigration and ICE, not so much the deportations. We've had some good Supreme Court wins. But this is a long game, man. This is a lifetime game. It's politics. There's no end in sight. So for us to say, I'm mad, and I'm taking my ball and I'm going home and I'm just going to stop paying attention to politics and forget. Okay, then you're abandoning your birthright. You're abandoning your country. You're abandoning your countrymen. You're abandoning a better life for your family and your children and your heritage. So we're not going to do that, but we're also not going to be cheerleaders and just, everything's amazing. Yeah. Over and over and over again when it's not. So anyways, that's what we're doing here. All right. So Londo, fixing elections is 90% of what matters until the midterms, which is part of the reason we're so upset about the FBI and the DOJ is because they were rigging the elections. They were trying to institute coups and attack political opponents to maintain political power. It's about political power. Elections are one mechanism to do that. Another mechanism is to just coup out your political opponents and prosecute them and attack them, which is what the FBI and the DOJ did openly. So we need repercussions for that. I don't want cases being dismissed that are filed 5 days before the SOL expires. we demand competence. We deserve competence, and we want progress. And I appreciate them going to the sporting venues and securing those and getting the drugs off the streets. And I thank you. That's basic functionality that we should expect from our government. We want remedies for the past wrongs that were existential to our nation state. We barely got this election back after what they did in 2020. It was, pretty, overwhelming election, but they could have put him in jail. They could have kicked him off the ballot. They could have shot him and killed him in the head, and it'd be a whole different world. They tried everything. So we got a long road ahead. We're here for it. We got the energy, baby. We're going to keep the energy up. We're going to keep the positivity up. We're going to stay optimistic here. But at the same time, we're going to offer some friendly, constructive feedback for our own side when necessary, Kash, Patel, or whomever, because that's America, baby. And that's what we do. Dan, you have to vote. Otherwise, you can't complain. We got to participate. Or you just abandon ship and you just roll over and you admit defeat. And the Democrats will just roll over all of us. They're not stopping. Are you kidding me? They're not stopping. So this is existential, and we've got to succeed. So we will. John, I have kids and a grandkid I can't give up. Londo, you give up, you abandon all you claim to love. 100%. Exactly right. All right, so let's do a refresh. Then we'll wrap it up here. And my friends, we'll be back tomorrow. It will be an early stream. So thank you for setting your notifications, hitting that notification button so that when we go live, we'll have you back here. We're not going to have an after party today, probably phasing those out based on the whole slew of reasons that we've talked about on the members only streams this morning. So we'll send you over to Good Logic right next door. And then we'll be back tomorrow to get into it again. We got 00 guys. At the polls is where we need to be at all levels. Top down is for fools. I am not MAGA. I am a child of the living God through Christ. Hey, me too. Says, prayerful vote, save your communities for the bottom up. I agree with that. Yeah, I really don't think that a leader is going to come and save us. A huge part of the reason we are doing what we're doing here is to create energy around these issues so that people can stay engaged and understand what's actually happening. So we can understand what's actually happening here. Look at the documents and piece it together so that we can create a bottom-up approach. We want America. I envision a country back like with the political energy like we had back during the founding era. And you can see the letters that these guys were written. There's a whole book here, Jefferson and the Adams letters, sending letters back to each other. There was a love of liberty in the air. People loved liberty. It was like this contagious concept. It wasn't like this, weird, everybody cared about it. Freedom. Then that got beaten out of us in the name of a bunch of other things, like safety and diversity and equity and inclusivity and all of these things. So you give up a little bit of this. Well, I don't want to die of COVID. So here, take my liberties, lock me down, make me take this in my body. I don't need liberty. I don't need freedom anymore. We want to rekindle that spirit. We have a beautiful country. We have an amazing Bill of Rights. We have an amazing God. We're very lucky to be born here and to be a part of this beautiful country. So we want to protect that and create a stronger culture around that and get people engaged in the process. But if you just think that Trump is going to be the solution forever, he's term limited. He can't run forever. So we have to create and inculcate this spirit back in our people. And I'm grateful for you for being here and being a part of that conversation because I think that's necessary. And it's a long road. Like this stuff takes generations. So we're here for it. And I'm really grateful for you for making it possible and for being a part of that journey. We got our work cut out for us. But the only option is total and complete victory. So that's what we're going to achieve. All right, my friends, it has been a beautiful day and an amazing stream. We'll pause here for the night. And we'll come on back tomorrow to get into it again. It's going to be Thanksgiving Eve, and it's going to be delicious. And Villa Plot. Yeah, we'll hit the song. We'll definitely play the song on the way out. And yes, this is a real photo of me when I was a country music singer in my prior life, before I started streaming on YouTube. It's a real photo. Singing, some country music songs. Hey, All right, good to see you, John. Rob, don't look at the algorithm analytics without considering the time change and your refusal to comply, from John. Yeah, thank you, John. It's good advice. John McGarvey, great advice. All right, so my friends, before we wrap it up, I want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths on the day. Big shout outs to John in the house, Donut Mind Me, Muffin Rando. We got K-Bean, Carrie B, Neuro D, Janik, and Dog Digger, along with Jigum, Elliot, and Just Rhonda, all modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly around here. But we'll pause for the night. And of course, we're coming back in the morning. I cannot wait to be back with you to see what the day has in store for us. Might be a little bit of a lighter week the rest of the week because it's holidays, but I'm sure we're going to have something juicy to get to. So thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking the video on the way out. And tonight, I hope you have an amazing rest and a beautiful sleep. But we are coming back tomorrow to get into it again. And in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. My friends, make it a beautiful night. Sleep very, very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we exposed corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news.